So, like, what inspired you to write dark fantasy, and like, what about the genre allows you to explore themes like self-acceptance and courage?
I think fantasy is a really interesting genre in that it's fantastical, obviously, but in that weird kind of roundabout way, it allows us to explore truths that
Yeah.
maybe we can't really look at directly. We're too scared or we're too awkward to look at directly, and so we create these fantasy realms where we can then explore it safely. In a similar way, I think it's amazing. It doesn't really change from when we're kids, right? And we have animal stories, that
Yeah.
allow us to safely, or Hansel and Gretel. I mean, there are so many horribly dark stories that we tell children, and that we've heard as children.
Yeah.
But they're basically about, beware of strangers and all these things, and life doesn't always go according to what you like, and there are some bad things in the world, and they get told to us through, these sort of parables, or these kind of stories that are kind of safe, or they're made safer for us. And so I think that dark fantasy kind of offers that a little bit, that it's not the real world, but we're going to explore probably very, very real things, because that's what we know, right? It's the world all around us, but we're exploring it in that different way. So I think that's partly what draws me to it, and also the sheer scope of imagination, I think, that you can bring to fantasy worlds, I think, is just very, very fun. And I've always liked that sandbox, and loved imagining different worlds, and not being too bound by the realities that we find ourselves in, obviously.
Yeah. I guess like being in that like different diverse environment and having all these different legends and cultures influence you really does broaden like your imagination for that. I would find like you
I
wouldn't
think it
be
does. I think travel is one of travel is one of my favorite things, just because it exposes you to so much, and new ideas and new concepts, and the fact that other people can think completely differently from how you think, is really inspiring.
So how do you balance your roles as a producer, screenwriter, and author? Do these creative outlets feed into one another, or do you find sometimes that it's conflicted?
Um, I think it can be conflicted. It's a very different part of the brain, I think, that the two sides use. So a producer brain can be very different from a purely author brain, or a purely storyteller brain. But that said, being an indie author, I think I benefit from my producer background, I think, because then I can put on a producer's hat a little bit more, and sort of look at the business side of things, and look at the practical side of things, and see things from that viewpoint, and not be, and if I can say so, not be so precious about what I write, because I look at it as being, well, I've got to satisfy myself, but I've also got to make sure that it's appealing to other people as well, and that it finds an audience, and that it can survive on its own. So I think producing has taught me a lot in that respect. So I do think that the two feed each other. I'm really grateful for my producing side of me, to help out with the more creative, head in the clouds type of author side.
Yeah. Speaking of the storytelling aspect, is the process different? Like the storytelling process different, or is it kind of similar?
To script writing, you mean?
Yeah, to script writing.
Uh, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, the writing and that process is so different. I think the sheer mass of words in a novel obviously makes it very different. It's a different. It's like a race, right? It's like a sprint versus a marathon, I guess. And in some ways, a novel can be a bit like a marathon, and a screenplay can be a bit like a sprint. But I think that's also what makes screenwriting so interesting. I think, is that because you do not have room for the number of words that you have in a novel, you have to be extremely disciplined and extremely spare
Yeah.
in screenwriting. which is a great skill to have too, because I mean it makes you show don't tell. That just becomes so important, right? And it gets drilled into you as a screenwriter, and so you can carry that over into your novel writing, to a certain extent. That okay, I definitely will do more of showing and not telling, right?
Yeah.
Which is great. But yeah, in that way, I think that the process is a little bit different. You got to pace yourself, right? The writing is kind of different. You sort of, I mean, there might be screenwriters out there that say they write 5 pages a day, and maybe that's how they pace themselves. I know that for novelists, a lot of people will do whatever, 2,000, 4,000, whatever words a day, and do it that way. I don't know whether screenwriters do the exact same pacing, but that process I think might be different, or at least for me anyway.
Yeah. Oh, that's like good, amazing to hear, because I've never spoken to anybody who's like a scriptwriter or producer before as well. So it's always fascinating, because storytelling in all its forms is very it's a very like um interesting process, and it's very intricate and it's very personal. I guess like from being an author, it's very solitary, whereas I guess like
Right.
producing and screenwriting, you're surrounded by different people and teams who influence the story as well. So like seeing what it is like behind the scenes and how that's like for you as an author is very fascinating.
Yeah, I think you've hit it on the head. It's kind of two extremes, right? In filmmaking, there's all these people, and you cannot make this by yourself. And not to say that authors can write a book by themselves, because obviously there's a team of editors and people. But yes, I think you're absolutely right. It's much more solitary, and you can bring it to a certain um, you can bring it to a certain standard and a certain phase without having a massive team of people around you, unlike filmmaking.